Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In this little video, we're going to be using the palette knife to paint a loose bird. So I hope you like painting birds with me. I have lots of them on my channel, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and keep my channel on YouTube's radar. So here's my, going to be using some quick dry medium with water mixable oil. I've got out a couple brushes here, and I've got out some alizarin, some Indian yellow. This is some pyro red, cad red medium, orange. This is transparent red oxide, cobalt blue, ice green, and that's ice green is this fun color from Holbein. And then I've got some of this, I think it's just permanent cad yellow permanent, so it's not as toxic. So I'm using, it's this one here, permanent yellow medium. So it's cheaper and there's no cadmium in it. And then I've got some sap green out and some titanium white and some black. So I'm starting off on a white gesso board today. And of course I've got out some water and I've got a few palette knives. So we're just gonna start out, just grab one of these, and I like to, if I don't paint the background a certain color prior to you know, starting, like I've been doing these red backgrounds, I could use a little bit of this transparent oxide red and a little bit of this water mixable quick dry medium. I'm just gonna put a little dab of that out on, right onto my, this is one of my favorite palettes, this Masterson Stay Wet palette, and I've got a link for that always in my videos, so that you can kind of just scrape it off after. It's really easy to use. I love it. And while I'm painting, I keep my palette clean. One of the things I see beginners doing is they will get a palette and they'll start putting paint on it, and it gets messier and messier, and before you know it, you get a bunch of mud. So you want to keep your palette clean. So by getting a layer of this quick dry medium down, it really helps. With water mixable oil, it dries a lot slower than kind of your average. I would say for me, even in the desert here, it dries a lot slower than regular oil paint. So I found that putting the quick dry medium in the first layer like this, it kind of sends it through to all the other layers, and it also, it just helps it dry faster. It also helps the paint kind of spread. I painted for many years using regular oil, and then I kind of decided a year ago just to get rid of some of the chemicals that I'm using. And it took me a while to get used to the water mixable oil because you can't use the terp. So yeah, anyways, I've gotten used to it now, especially on these little boards. Just saves you having to breathe in all those chemicals and deal with all the terp and everything afterwards. So let me know in the comments if you have switched to water mixable oil, or if you're still using acrylic. What's the main medium you use? Helps me to know what videos I should film. So your feedback is always really important to me. So anyhow, just grab one of these little brushes, and we're going to be painting this little cardinal, keeping it simple and loose. So I'm adding a little cobalt into that little mix of paint. And although in the reference photo the bird is on a little like log or something, tree, I'm just gonna draw kind of a more, I thought I'd draw a little more of a spring cardinal, so I'm gonna draw a branch, and then I can show you how to do some really loose kind of abstract cherry blossoms at the end. So we'll just keep it real simple, you know, one or two branches. Don't want to overload the little thing. So maybe get a little black in there, and you can quickly just sketch out this little bird. I paint a lot of these birds, as most of you know by now from following me for years. I paint lots of these around Christmas time, but I realized that they're such a meaningful bird to a lot of people that I thought this year I'm going to paint them in different seasons. So I'm just painting these shapes, and I'm looking at the mask sort of as a shape, and then I'm going to go down and sort of just, it's like kind of a little ball, his little body, and then I'm going to just kind of bring down that wing, and you can have it kind of coming down behind the branch. And then there's the little feet. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of where it's all gonna go. And I'm just gonna now take my paper towel and kind of just gonna wipe away a little bit more of that underpaint there on the beak and where the eye's gonna go, just so I don't have the paint too slippery. It's a little bit, I don't mind the extra water mixable, you know, the quick dry medium there, but I kind of want it a little less around where I want the details to go. Otherwise the paint kind of slides a bit. So I'm just using this little Artist Loft, what is it, level 3 round 4. These are from Michael's, and you know, I just sort of, I use really inexpensive brushes. Nothing fancy. In the beginning I thought that it was important to buy expensive brushes, but really they all kind of get messy and you have to get rid of them, and it's like I'd rather just throw away a $5 brush that works than a $30. I just don't have the time to make, you know, to do all the brush maintenance that some artists do. So I'm just gonna work in what I see, and always your eye is going to be drawn to the darkest dark near the lightest light. Sort of like you just have to make sure you get that area the way you want it. I'll probably make the beak a little smaller, even though he does have a big beak in the picture. There, that looks a little better. Okay, and then okay, black in there, just darken that. Think of it as like a little ball, and you're just shadowing like a little round ball, and so you don't get too overwhelmed by the fact that it's a bird. When I first started painting birds, you know, I felt a little bit intimidated. So the main thing is just to paint shapes, and it turns out to be what it turns out to be, and not worry so much about how exact or whatever it looks, because birds they look cute either way. If they don't turn out exact, like a real portrait of a wildlife painting sort of thing, even if they don't turn out like that, they always look really cute. My students, when I do a live class and I see all their paintings, there's not one painting there that I wouldn't want to hang on my wall, because everyone has their own everyone has a little character to it, and you know, none of them look like perfect drawings or anything, but they all have their own little flair, you know, their own little kind of personality. Then I'm going to go and use you can use some cad red just to sort of start lightening, you know, up the body, lightening it up. And Pyro Red, I have found, is one of the brightest kind of reds to use for these. And I'll use a little orange in there and the Pyro Red. And start to add some more lighter paint. And then I can start to see where things are shaped bad, so I can see, okay, this has got to come in more, a lot more. So I'm way better at seeing things when I start adding the values of color to my painting. So if I spent a long time drawing, I would still start painting and be able to see it better. That's just what works for me. Don't forget anything you see. There's certain things I know aren't exact. I like to use the background also to kind of shape my bird too. So I'll leave a lot of that to the end. Get a little white in there. And there's sort of some real bright little wing kind of coming out here. And okay, so that's a good start on the reds. I'll put out a little more paint for when I start using my palette knife. Put out some of this. Actually, the vermilion red is a great red for this too, because it's got a lot of orange in it. So you can kind of see in the cardinals on his head, you get a lot of that bright orangey red. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and start adding a little detail using the little brush again. Got a bunch of white there. I'm just going to get a bit of cobalt blue and brown. Just mix up a gray. And I like to make sure I get the little eye in there. And so I'll draw the shape of the eye using this gray. I'll cut it in even into the red there. Get some of that darker color. See the shadow back in. And then after you draw that gray, you go back in with the black and then you shape it out. And I can kind of add a little detail to around the bird. And then I'll take a little more blue and I will just sort of add a little highlight right there. Kind of like to see the eye like that early on in my painting. Okay, so now I'm gonna get some dark, that alizarin in there because I really want the shadow, the shape of the beak to show, so you kind of have to get that shadow in there. I'll use some of that vermilion in there. And next I'm going to add like kind of a brighter orangey red for the beak, and then you'll see that I add a lot of a light color to it to really show off that beak, the way it shines in the light. Almost just using orange and white would work. Okay, just a little bit of light for now. You can always go and work it some more, but I don't want to overdo it yet because, you know, all the values and everything we can gauge a little better with when we get the background on. The beak will kind of, depending on what color I do the background, will kind of change a bit here and there. Now I'm just going to adjust put a little more shadow back in into the back bit here. And just make him a little bigger on the body. He looks a little bit, looks like he had a little bit of too much coffee or something. He's kind of bunched up. So let's kind of move the twig a little. You got a little short looking there. There. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that because I'm going to put in the background in a little more detail, and then I'll come back to that. Just wipe away a little more. There. Okay. All right, so for the background, because it's going to be a spring blossom, I'm going to just block in first actually a few blossoms. I'm going to use a little bit of that Indian yellow, and I'm just going to put in some of that just right into the background color. We'll see what happens. Now I'll add some white. Just put in a few, kind of rough in some real abstract type blossoms. And while you're at it, you can get a little sap green, little cobalt blue. The sap green that I'm using here is, I don't know what brand it is, but it's a little bit almost like they added a lot of black to it. I think it's, I'll put out a little bit of this phthalo green just to get a little more punch in that green. Okay, just a few marks here and there. You can see how loose I kept that. And now I'm going to start, applying some thicker paint. So this is where we can have fun with some thick paint and kind of making some marks here. Can even add a little yellow, just some of that white and a little bit of orange. That's why you get a little bit of a more depth to your whites. You don't want them all just to be the same. Okay, so we're going to leave that for now because we got to go and put in a bit of a background color. So just going to muck some of this up a bit. Okay. So I'm going to get a little white and I'll get some of this cobalt blue and mix it in there just to keep it simple. And I'll take a little bit of that ice green. I'll make a little pile of that too because I really like that color in the background. And I'll just sort of have one other shade of kind of a gray in the sky. It's good to kind of, especially if you're wanting it to be a little looser and everything, it's kind of fun to have a few different colors going on in the background. also think about, you know, the edges and the values, so I'll put, you know, a lighter color right next to like the chest here, so it really shows the shape of the bird. So I apply a lot of this with my palette knife, but then you can use your brush to sort of blend it a bit. Okay, so now I'll get this little brush here and just sort of kind of move it around a bit. Just adding a little bit of kind of more looser marks now using the palette knife. And one of the things I will say is if you use too much of that water quick dry medium like I did, it sort of has caused a little bit of a too much paint mixing from the underpaint. So just one thing I've learned on this paint, every painting I learn something, but this painting I got a little enthusiastic about that stuff, so I should have wiped away more in the beginning. So if you're following along, that's one thing I would say to take note of there. Now I can shape the bird's head a little bit, like in the reference photo, it kind of goes in there. And then it kind of put in a bit of shadow there. And then a little more light on the head. Okay. It's a little more work this time for me because of how much of that underpaint, just sort of not getting the effects as easy, so it's making it so the paint kind of glides in too fast to the layer. So because there's so much of that, well, hopefully the painting will dry fast, but other than that it's kind of made it harder to paint with, but that's the way it goes. And it's also a little hotter today in Arizona, so I don't know if it's that. Everything's a little different. Who knows? All right. So I'm going to clean up my palette a bit and put out some more color, and then I'm going to come back to it. Okay, so once you get that background on there, you can kind of go in now and tweak it a little. I'm just going to add some more, put out a little bit more white. I'm kind of getting low on white. Put out some raw sienna, and put out a little bit more of that vermilion color, Cobra vermilion. Okay, so where we left off, I had just kind of painted this background in, and I used a little bit too much of this water quick dry medium, so it was getting kind of muddy. So I let it sit for a while. I never do this, but I got busy with the kids and everything, so I just kind of let it sit. It's been sitting for like a few days. And so now what I'm gonna do is do the final touches. So the, let's put my reference photo back on. Okay, so I'm gonna need some shape. Right now it's pretty monochromatic, so I need to have some lighter values of that red. So I'm just gonna use a little vermilion, and I wanna make sure we can kind of see the little cheek. So I'm just gonna smudge that in with my palette knife. Just using this little tiny thin palette knife, which I like. And just add some of those lighter colors to the mix there. And I'll add a little bit of this cad red right here. And some alizarin. Lucky my paints didn't dry out. I hate having to throw away paint. So I'm just gonna add that in and then go back and get a little more of that vermilion. So now he's starting to look less than just a, you know, little round red ball. And you can see how quick you can build when you got that darker base. You've got that kind of undertone to build on. I want to keep the darker area on the wing there, and now I'm going to pay a little more attention to the reference photo. There's a little bit, so we've got this wing coming up here, and I could actually kind of go in with some alizarin and a little dab of black and kind of reestablish where that wing is, because it got a little bit iffy, kind of got smucked out. So put a little bit of that dark back in for the wing. And then we can kind of go back to building. And it's creating some texture and some volume by adding all this. And I'll add some of the details on the wing, just using the edge of this palette knife. If that doesn't work for you, this palette knife, maybe the oval shape of it, it kind of has these oval, just go get something that has more of a flat edge, and we can kind of put in, yeah, that's a little better. A little better. And then a little bit of that edge of the tail. Like that. And now I'm going to get some cobalt blue, a little bit of white, so you can see, make that kind of purpley red. And ooh, I added up too much red. Too much. Okay. I want it to be more kind of on the blue side. And you can add a bit of that to the shadow. Kind of adds a different tone to it. And even on the wingtip, there's sort of a light kind of purpley red. Okay, now I can go in using my little round brush again, and I want to clean up some of the details. That was a little bit too, the paint was so runny the other day, it just kind of, it was kind of our first really hot day in Arizona too, so I felt like everything was melting. So today I've got my air conditioner going. Get a little bit of white and just put a little more of a spark on the eye. And I want to get that eyelid in there a little bit more. Things like the legs, I'll just sort of get that in there and kind of redraw the little claw bit. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to using my brush a little and get some of that ice green again. And I'm going to just sort of clean up around the feet because it's too hard with this palette knife to get it right. And I'll go and get, I'll fix the branch and all that too. Yeah, the colors were, the background color was getting a lot, kind of, just getting kind of muddy, and so I had to go anyways and pick up my son from school, so I thought, what the heck, I'm just gonna leave it, and I'll come at it again with some fresh paint here. Fresh eyes and a fresh paint. Get a little more white in there, a little more yellow, kind of make a nice, real pale coral color for the beak. There, so it's starting to get some, a little bit nicer. And then kind of fill in a bit more. It was looking, the beak was looking too black. So kind of bringing that color down. Make sure to keep your brush clean when you're working on this. you'll kind of notice that the black mask lines up above and below. That's another little trick to your drawing, is kind of look at where does it line up above and below. I'll fix it a bit more. And sort of take that off there. I'm going to get some of this raw umber and put a little white in there, and I need to kind of add a little action to these blossoms. They were getting too muddy because the bottom color was just smudging in, and it was just starting to look like a brown puddle of petals. They weren't looking like petals. They were just kind of looking like too smudgy. I don't mind abstract, but I don't want it to look like mud. Starting to look really rough. And so sometimes it's better to just take a break. Okay,